Do our levels look okay to you?
Yeah, so far.
We're recording quite differently today. Well, it's not quite different from season 1, but we got so used to recording remotely. It's weird to actually be looking at each other in real life.
I know. It feels wrong somehow.
And you guys, listen, you should see our setup because my house has, I have someone there checking our air conditioning, which means they need to be in and out of every room of the house because the air conditioning vents go all through. It's central air, so it goes all throughout the house. So I asked Ashley if I could drive to her place today to record, and she's still got construction happening all around her home. So
right behind it.
Of
course.
So, of course, we're going to do our best to noise reduce, but if you hear beeping or clanking or asphalt pouring, don't mind it. It's just life happening.
Yep.
Because we are holed up in her bedroom. We have all the doors and windows closed. We're trying to make it as like studio-like as possible.
We'll see how well we do.
We're sitting crisscross applesauce on the floor as we record.
Yep.
Speaking of which, welcome to Dizzy for Deezy.
Yes. I'm Ashley.
I'm Kristen, and this is our first official episode for season 2 of Sensual Kapama.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
And
it's so exciting.
Yeah. I have so many things to say.
Kristen, that's what they're gonna put on your tombstone. She had so many things to say.
Please make sure that happens.
That's literally if you had a subtitle for your life. Like the title of your book would be Kristen, and the subtitle would be She Has So Many Things to Say.
And Ashley's would be I just sat and listened. Oh my gosh.
Oh,
I think
man.
you guys just figured out why we're best friends. Oh my gosh.
Oh, Lord.
Anyways, okay, I have more than usual to say. Don't spit out your coffee. Yeah. So, needless to say, we're very excited. I think if you guys have been listening to us for more than like 5 minutes at a time, you know exactly why that is.
Yeah.
Because
you guys know.
Our favorite writer is back on the writing throne.
And honestly, if anyone...
Say it. Say it, Ashley. Say it.
Like,
is this Soapbox Ashley? Is this Soapbox Ashley?
This was a perfect episode.
Listen.
This was great writing at its finest.
I agree.
And anybody who disagrees, sorry, you should probably stop listening to this podcast right now. Unless you're like, hey, I'd love to hear your perspective.
Right. If you're
and let's have a actual dialogue. You know. But
yes, if you're not looking to have your mind changed, then
or to consider the possibility that your mind might be changed. You know, because I'm all about talking to people that I disagree with. If you can have a good logical dialogue, and you can actually try to understand the other person's perspective, but. Anyway.
Well, no, I think it's important not to live in an echo chamber.
Of course.
But not to the extent where it's just nothing but arguing and like it gets ugly.
Or if somebody disagrees with you, you don't need to villainize them.
Right. Exactly.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you're right.
But I think it was a perfect episode.
I do too. Oh, and trust me, you guys, if Ashley hadn't have had to work, and had been able to watch the live episode, we would have absolutely done like a super last minute impromptu recording, but she wasn't able to watch. So
desperately trying to finish stuff up.
So it all got saved for today.
Yeah,
but that's okay. It gave us time to watch the episode with subs twice.
Yep.
And digest things and
I'm really glad actually. Yeah, because. It felt again like, okay, I need to watch this again so I can pay closer attention. Yeah. And there were absolutely things I caught the second watch that I didn't catch the first time.
Yep.
Which
it
is
always,
so typical.
I know.
And I was so excited.
I know. Because how long has it been since, well, like 16 episodes?
It's been months.
Yeah. It's been months since that's happened.
It's been an eternity.
Because Yeah, like before, and I think I mentioned this in our YouTube live last week, like, during the 30s, if you guys listened, you know exactly how we felt. We don't need to rehash that. But because there wasn't a whole lot to dig into, we would barely watch the episode one full watch. And there wasn't really anything else to find.
Yeah.
Whereas that's not the case anymore. And the crazy thing to me is, like, there's probably still going to be stuff we either missed or don't bring up or forget to mention.
Of course.
Because there's just so much. And it's like, not that I needed the reminder, but it's always nice to have the reminder of exactly why we love Aisha's writing. And I'm really excited about, because she has a different team working with her.
Yes.
Denise and Malek. I don't remember is it Malek? I believe it's Malek and Denise. I don't remember their last names, but they have a pretty good reputation for communication in their characters, like solid writing. So I think the three of them together, I mean, if this episode is any indication, it's a really good, not pairing, whatever three of that is, but
trio.
Yes, trio. Thank you. Yeah, thanks, trio. Because one of her writers is actually doing a new DZ, which is pretty cool. It's one of the ones I want to check out. And then the person who actually created EK, because Aisha wrote EK for the first 17 episodes and then most of the 40s, but she wasn't the creator like she was of Senchal Kapama.
Right.
But the creator of EK actually has a DZ, Jom Tavanlar, and you watched the first episode.
I did.
Is it good?
It's really good.
Oh,
honestly, I went into it, I didn't really know anything about it, but I had seen, honestly, the reason I started it is because I saw Krisha tweeting about it. And she was like, okay, I really like this. Oh, okay, I like this. Okay, I like this. And so after she had basically given it her stamp of approval, I was like, all right, let me check this out. And I didn't realize it was the EK creator, but it very much, super strong protagonist woman.
Love it.
It's like a second chance romance. But there's some strife between, mostly from her to him.
Okay.
And it's got these really cool metaphorical storytelling things, because the show is called Glass Ceilings, and they tie that in throughout the entire first episode a lot.
I love that. And that doesn't surprise me, just because I did see the teaser for it.
Okay.
I didn't watch either of the fragments. I think there's been 2 fragments. Anyways, but when the teaser came out, and I didn't know what Jom Tavanlar meant yet.
Sure.
So I watched the teaser, and I literally tweeted, and I said, oh my gosh, because in the teaser, she like shatters a glass ceiling. And I was like, is this going to be like a metaphor for women shattering the glass ceilings of them? And then when I Googled what Jom Tavanlar meant, like 5 minutes later, I was like, oh, the show is literally called Glass Ceilings. Like, maybe you should have checked that first, Kristen. Whoops.
Yeah.
So that's really... Ooh, that's cool.
It's cool, and I feel like it's a little more atypical storytelling as far as DZs go,
which is always nice,
of societal things and so I really appreciated it. I thought it was a really solid first episode.
Yay.
Yeah. And the main couple doesn't meet until about halfway through, and you get a lot of the almost kind of fable-ish storytelling of her background and her life. So it really sets her up as a main character, which I really enjoyed. Nice. I really liked it, and I want to keep going with it.
I know. I want to check it out. I'm behind on Marashla.
Well, so am
I know, but you started it much really later, and you've been behind. Like today's Monday. I actually won't get to watch the new episode when subs come out, because I still need to watch last week's episode.
Okay.
And that's like the first time since like January that has happened, which I have a feeling that's going to happen all summer now, because I realized. Well, yeah, and I realized too when I started Marashla, Senchal Kapama was already in the 30s.
Yeah,
and that explains that. So. I'm like,
but Aisha's back, baby.
Yes, that's what. Cause I was like, wait, I was watching this while Senchal Kapama was airing, and it was fine. And then I was like, oh yeah, but there wasn't really any depth to the story. So
yeah.
So I'm behind on Marashla, and I want to check out Ada Masala, I think is how you say it, which is what one of Aisha's writing. One of the members of her previous writing team is writing for that one, and she tweeted about it, and so I'm like, well, I want to check that one out too. That one's had like a ton of teasers and stuff.
Okay.
And it's funny because I still don't know one thing about it, even though there's been like 5 teasers. Okay. Like, there's very little dialogue in most of them.
So you're like, what's this even about?
But, I mean, it drives up the curiosity, so I guess it's doing its job. True. So we'll see if and when I get to check both of these out. But anyhow. And then one, I just have to bring, I mean, we have other housekeeping, but I just have to say, can we talk about how much Hande and Karim sing Aisha's praises?
Oh, I know.
Oh my gosh.
It's a little...
okay. You know that Brooklyn Nine-Nine gif?
Uh-huh. That's exactly what I was thinking of.
Is it?
Yes.
Vindication! When Holt is like...
Yep.
That is what that feels like when that happens for me. Because it tells me that they really appreciate her style of storytelling. I mean, and not that we didn't already know that, because they've mentioned in the past...
Yes.
It was her story. It was her writing that got them interested in the script to even want to read it and, be on the show. But it's really nice. Obviously, we can't speak for them. But I just think silence says a lot sometimes. And there was a lot of silence during episodes that we didn't love.
And save for some specific things or scenes or things like that.
Yes.
A lot of it was not necessarily directed at the writing specifically.
Right.
Whereas now they are being very vocal about the writing.
I mean, he tweeted, back just before the finale aired, like, we will be back like no other. And I'm like, you can't tell me he didn't know she was back by then. Because when it was announced that that doesn't mean that was right when it happened. That just means it's when we all found out.
Yeah. I'm sure they knew way before.
Absolutely. Yeah. So him saying that, and then him, from the second they started filming, he's like, this season, the whole cast, not even just, when they did one of their first lives and it was like all the cast, they were all talking about like, oh my gosh, these episodes and this season's going to be great. And then when they went live, because I thought it was didn't you think it was so sweet that the whole like cast and crew watched the first episode together?
I stinking loved that.
And they said,
and like when Little John's first scene came up, they were all applauding for him. Like, oh my gosh.
I know. Ahmet and Maya are like, listen, let me tell you, this is something that also tells you what good writing is. In a book, if I were to pick up a romance novel that had a secret baby plot, I'd probably DNF it.
Yeah, me too. It's not my favorite trope by any means.
At all. No. The fact that I am still super excited about this one, because when you just love an author or a writer or like you're willing to read or watch or whatever stuff that normally you wouldn't from other authors or writers, because that their style is something that pulls you in, and so there's always that whole like, well, they could totally be doing this in a way,
they could do it really well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and already I feel like that's where we're headed.
Oh yeah.
So anyways, they were a great addition. I would have never thought, what, this cast needs children. Like I would have never thought that. But it really is hitting the reset button and really giving it a fresh take and opening a new page.
Totally.
So anyhow, but yeah, so when they all went live, and then of course, and I loved it. God bless Karim, he's learning, because he's like, I don't want to say anything wrong. But he's basically like, and God bless Hande, because she's so much better at this stuff than he is, because she's like, Aisha's pen is magical and she's lovely. Like, she kind of just stepped in, which was a good thing. Because that just made me so excited. I'm like, I will never get sick of them singing her praises, because I'm like, I just love to know that they love the same type of storytelling that we clearly do.
Yep.
So, anyway, sorry, I know we could do a whole podcast just about that. I
know.
Anyhow, I think that's pretty much it for homework, or why do I always call it homework? Housekeeping. Something that was interesting that I found out on Twitter, a lot of people were tweeting about it, so I'm not sure who exactly figured it out first. And this credit I would imagine goes to the editing team or the director.
Okay.
And it could be a coincidence, but I don't know. Even if it is a coincidence, it's quite the Kismet coincidence. The first time Ed Sarah really have like eye contact and like actually see each other is at the 27-minute and 2-second mark in the episode 1 of season 1 and episode 1. And I just thought that's just cool because like most of the, I mean, our fandom is a unique one. So they are the CIA and find all this stuff. But for the most part, that's not something people would really notice. No. So when someone like a director or, you know, camera, I don't know who the proper person is to credit for that, but like takes the time to do something like that, knowing most likely it's a detail that's going to go unnoticed. Like I appreciate it so much. Yeah. So I just wanted to shout out whoever's responsible for that.
Yeah, that's great.
So yeah, I think we can start talking about this masterpiece of an episode.
I love it.
Me too.
So it's 5 years later.
It's 5 years later.
Big time jump.
Big.
I was like, okay.
I expected a year. I expected a year, but I'm down with the 5 years.
Yeah, and of course I was kind of laughing at the beginning with the misdirect with the phone call.
Yes.
Because we know that they're talking to other people, but it was very kind of masterfully done in that you see both of them on the phone and you think they're talking to the other one because it sounds like the conversation is going that way.
Absolutely.
But you find out that Eda is talking to Barack and then Serkan is talking to Parul.
Yeah. Yes. So basically we figure out, when we actually see who they're talking to, Serkan is doing something for work. And it seems that Eda is doing something that's just like fun and whimsical. And so already that just encompasses who they are.
Yes, very much.
You know, Eda's with this guy who we don't quite know who he is yet. Right. Barack. But okay, we can talk about this now or we can talk about it later. But after watching the episode, can you pin him down? Like,
no, I do think he has feelings for Eda.
I do too,
I think that's pretty clear. But
I know it's hard. Like, he's not a bad guy. But
no.
I kind of get this vibe of like, are you gonna cross a line? Because like, you know, even with his whole like, well, where's Eda? Like constantly concerned with where she is when she's not in the scene. Even the whole like, oh well, when he brought the fish later on, you know, and then was like, oh, is she at dinner with that Serkan Bola? And Mila's like, well, how do you know who that is? Like, you know, where it's like...
Well, and he doesn't deny that Kiraz is his child to Serkan.
When he says, teach your daughter manners or whatever he says.
And then when they tell Melo, he's just kind of like, oh, yeah, ha, ha, ha. He doesn't hate it, obviously.
Right.
Which, you know, it could just be a sign of how much he loves little Kiraz, and that's fine. But
right.
I'm wondering if I could see him being a point of conflict in Edser getting back together.
Right.
Or but maybe only slightly.
Yeah, I don't think any of these new characters who are clearly meant to be, you know, because obviously Denise, the hotel
so
lady, like,
funny. I'm
you know what I mean?
I'm like, is she just typecast?
That's what I said. I said this poor typecast woman.
Just give her strawberries and get rid of her.
That's what well, during the live watch, I literally tweeted, "Someone give that hotel owner a strawberry smoothie." And obviously the EK neutrals totally got it. But
of course,
you know, neither one of them seem like they're going to be any real threats, which honestly is not shocking because that is the way Aisha does jealousy is in a comedic, not so frustrating way. Like, it's drain the pool. It's I have a dog too.
Yes.
It's, you know.
Yep.
And so, I'm not worried about them. I just am like, ooh, Barack, are you going to be like a sad puppy? Like a sad little pathetic puppy dog? Or, like, are you going to realize you have no chance and that you just appreciate that you have a nice friendship with Eda? And
I almost wonder if he is going to end up being endgame for Melo.
I know, because I couldn't tell with the subs. Because... Yeah, and I did talk to our sub angel, you guys. He will be back with subtitle files for us. I'm sure he needed
a break too.
He absolutely did. Work and just life was very busy. And so so we will be getting subtitle files this season as he can do them. But so I didn't really get to there was a few scenes I was like, man, I wish I had clarification on this. And normally I would ask Miriam, but she's been so busy with like finals and work and all this stuff. And I'm like, I don't want to ask her because I know if I asked her, she would do it. But she probably doesn't have the time.
You don't want to take up their time.
No, I don't want to be a burden. Yeah. So there are a few things that I'm like, man, I hope we get clarification. But I figure if anything, we can talk about it next week. If there's something that really pops up and is... Anyways, but I kind of got the feeling maybe that's where that's headed because Melo makes a comment at one point later in the episode like, well, maybe one day that'll be directed towards me, like these kinds of feelings. But I didn't know if she meant like in a general sense, like someone will feel that for
love,
me,
right?
Yes, or if she was being specific to Barack. So
anyways. we'll see.
Yes. But anyways, Edda's being Edda, Serkan's being Serkan.
Well, and I love the whole implication right straight from the start that Serkan is haunted by Edda. Because he sees her in every tall woman with beautiful hair and the balloons. He sees the back of the truck.
Yep. Yes, that quote from the back of the truck. Yep. Don't be afraid of the dark or if you find yourself in the dark, don't be afraid because that's when you see the stars. That's that's essentially what it's saying. So of course, not only was it a truck quote, which already alludes to Edda,
right?
But then it kind of references her even within the quote because Yıldızlar, like stars. Exactly. So chef's kiss. I just missed that so much.
Yeah. So that was beautiful because you know that it's not over for him.
No.
We know it's not over for Edda. That's obvious, especially with Kiraz. But for Serkan, he's the harder one to pin down.
Yes.
He's Mr. Emotionally Constipated Starch Man. So it's just lovely to see it, and then he's just so bothered.
Yes. Yeah, he has to drive around the truck. Not because the truck's driving too slowly, but because he's got this quote staring him in the face.
He can't stand it.
Nope. Which then leads to because nothing really big happens with Edda and Barack. They just go to this shop that's got all kinds of fun goodies and things, and they go shopping. What happens with Parul and Serkan, though, it's very evident that Parul is the one working, because she basically Serkan basically ends up canceling this job that they were going to be at because he finds out that they kind of made some tweaks that he's not just going to be in New York, he's going to be in Minnesota too. And he's like, do you know where the closest hospital is? It's 40 kilometers away. And how is Serkan Bolat?
He's back. He's worried about the hospital being far away.
Yes, which honestly is just classic Serkan and makes even more sense as somebody who has recovered from a brain tumor.
Absolutely.
Who probably needs to have scans on the regular, all that kind of stuff. So, speaking of which, then he asks Parul if brain tumors.
What?
Brain tumors.
Whoa.
What's that called? A spoonerism? When you switch the... Anyways.
Yes.
Brain tumors. He asks if they can make you hallucinate. And she's like, Serkan, you don't have a brain tumor.
I love that.
You literally just had a scan last week. You were cured years ago.
For years.
And so she's like, and I know there were some people who saw that as insensitive, but here's the thing. It's Serkan. Like, and you have to be
they've known each other for years.
And you have to be a straight shooter with them. You know what I mean? Like, with someone like Serkan, you can't coddle him. So I don't think it was a matter of her being insensitive. It was just a matter of, like, listen, here's the reality. Let's stay in it.
Yes.
Like, let's be logical about this.
Yeah.
You've been cured. You were scanned. You're fine. You're not hallucinating because of a brain tumor.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Serkan ends up canceling this job because he's like, no, they made last minute changes. We're not working with them, which of course Pearl's like, we're disgraced. Like, this is ugly. Yeah. He's like, no, what's ugly is them, making these changes. Forget it.
Yeah.
And she's like, so you made me do all of this when I could have just been home with my son. And that's when we kind of get the idea that she's the one working. Engin's the one who stays home with John. And can I just say, I love that so much for them. They are exactly the kind of parents I would picture them to be. And God bless Aisha and her team for redeeming Pearl, because 30s Pearl was
not Pearl.
Was not Pearl. She was body snatched, much like many of the characters during the 30s.
Yep.
But she just became this, like, stereotype in the worst way of pregnant hormonal women.
Yeah.
And she was just a caricature of herself, I think is the best way to describe it. So I love that was just completely nipped and undone within the first 5 minutes of the episode.
Yeah. I said I think my exact note on them is that Engin and Pearl are chaotic good as parents.
Yes, it's true. It really is true. Like I don't know. I was so happy to see that they were Engin and Pearl again.
Yeah. Yep.
So.
Yeah. So basically Serkan, sorry,
That's okay.
said, so he's on his way. Is this when he's...
Well, okay, there's a quick little over at the office.
Okay, yeah. Because they go back to the office, and then right as they get there, Pearl gets a phone call, and it's Engin, and he has to take John to the hospital because he fell or got a cut, and they have to take him to the ER real quick. So she zooms out, tells Erdem to cancel her meeting, and then Erdem, of course, can't cancel a meeting because he's Erdem. So he kind of, sneaks his way into Serkan's office, and he's like, hey, listen, so Pearl had something come up, and there's this meeting. So Serkan goes to the meeting.
Which is in Chile, which is, what do you know, where Eda is currently working on the landscape at a hotel.
Yes.
The same hotel that ArtLife is clearly doing the architecture on.
Right. And a renovation and all this stuff. Yeah. So enter Kiraz and a return to me feeling, which happens many times this episode.
Yes.
First, it happens with Eda because she's kind of like, oh my gosh, what's going on? She gets this sense, this feeling that comes over her as she's working in the garden. And we see, from our perspective, Serkan almost hitting Kiraz with his car.
Oh my gosh.
And that's the moment that the feeling kind of overcomes Eda. And some sort of, mystical...
invisible handcuffs.
Exactly. Happens the second that they meet.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and Kiraz is sassy just like her mama.
Oh my gosh. I said LOL, these two stubborn brats.
Because, she's basically like, or he gets out and he's like, are you okay? I almost hit you. And she's like, well, maybe you shouldn't be on your phone. Which, I mean, she has a point.
Yes, she does. Yeah. He shouldn't be on his phone.
No. And, so they kind of bicker a little bit. And he's like, well, what are you doing? Like, you're a kid out in the street. Like, what are you doing? Do you run away from home? And she's like, I'm picking blackberries. Yeah, I ran away from home. What are you, 2? Like, just like...
Oh, and he's like, well, get in the car. I need to take you to your mom. And so she is like, no, I need to pick more blueberries since you made me drop all these.
And he's like, okay, then I'm leaving you. And why do you even need to pick these blackberries, blah, blah, blah. And she says, because you don't start something you're not going to finish. I have to finish what I'm started, which was totally an allusion to episode 6.
Yep.
When Serkan tells Eda when they're doing that whole house renovation, that, you don't enter a game you can't win, and you don't enter a game you can't win, and you don't lose a game that you've entered.
Yep.
So I loved that clearly she's being raised on values that not only belong to Eda, but she's raising her on values that Serkan has taught her.
Yep.
And I love that. So, I don't even think Serkan realizes that when she says it.
Oh,
but
no way. Yeah.
I think he respects it because then he winds up sitting on the hood of his car and waiting for her to finish picking her blackberries.
Yep. So they end up back in the car, obviously, and he gets her all buckled in, and she's like, what's your name anyway? And he's like, Serkan Bolat. And she's like, oh, do you have many horses?
I loved that. I thought that was so cute.
Very cute.
And because he does have horses. That's what's even funnier.
Yes. But I love that him being like, no, Bolat means very strong. And I was like, that reeks of I also have a dog energy. He has to prove himself to this little girl.
Oh my god.
He's like, no, it means very strong, but I also have horses.
So true. And then she gets her little sticky fingers all over the inside of the car, which someone pointed out how funny that, you know, in the beginning, Edda has to unwillingly get in the car with Serkan in the first episode.
Right.
Kiraz basically has to, this sounds bad, unwillingly get in the car, but he's not kidnapping her.
Right.
And they both kind of damage his car. She's keying. Edda's keying it when he first meets her.
Yep.
And Kiraz is wiping her little blackberry juice hands. Jam hands, yes.
That was all I thought of.
Thank you, Luke Danes.
Like, see, Luke Danes is right. She's got jam hands.
Oh my gosh. Literally. So, you know, then there's some more bickering. He has to take a phone call and he's trying to get her to be quiet and she's giggling. And he's like, I understand I'm late and all this stuff. So he basically is like, you're coming to the hotel with me now. We'll just drop you off with a guard or something because I'm late. And she's just kind of like, okay, whatever. He's like, by the way, what's your name? And she says, Kiraz. And he's like, what's your real name? And she's like, that is my real name. Do you want to know my last name? And clearly it's not Bolat because she would have immediately said something.
Like, oh, I have the same last name.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's clearly Yildiz. Or at least maybe that's all she knows of her last name being. Maybe she's registered as Bolat.
Sure.
You know, but anyways. So, but they get interrupted. He gets off the phone and then he's like, okay, gosh, what the heck? Like, where's your dad? And she's like, well, my dad's not here. He's far away. And he's like, of course. And she's like, well, he's an astronaut.
Yeah, he's in space.
Which honestly, again, because did you know astronaut means star sailor?
Oh, so I like that.
It's totally an allusion to the Little Prince.
Oh, of course. And I'm like, of course he's an astronaut. Like, if of course his mysterious where he's at is going to be something to do with space and stars.
And stars, because that's very Serkan. And then it ties in the Little Prince later, which we'll get into. Someone did like a really good analysis on that I'll read when we get to those story times. And I love, he's like, oh, okay, your dad's an astronaut, of course. Your name is Kiraz. Is your mom a Pegasus? Like,
and she's like, no, my mom's a fairy girl.
And when she's like, do you have a fairy? And he's like,
oh, no. So good. So good. I love that she asked him if he has a fairy.
I know. And did you know, I thought this was interesting about Pegasi. I think that's the plural of Pegasus.
That sounds right.
The Pegasus symbolizes freedom, and it can only be ridden by gods or demigods who are noble and good-hearted. So I kind of loved that. Like,
well, and that, you know, again, we're getting back into all the symbolism, and we talked about earlier in another episode that Serkan's name means noble, and we're gonna come back to that. So
okay. I'm so excited because I did not even note that part. Like, I didn't even do the call.
A couple things occurred to me as this was all.
Okay. Awesome.
We'll get to that.
Awesome. So, you know, then we get the whole. He drives her to the hotel. Excuse me. And he's like, "We'll leave you with the guard," and she's like, "No need, because my mom's here."
And
but they have the whole
runs off.
I love it. She just runs off. And then we had of course, from the fragment, the whole. Are you going to undo my seatbelt? Are you going to open my door? And I was like, good. Her mom is teaching her to have standards, as she should. Like, yes, he can undo your seatbelt. Yes, he can open your door and be a gentleman. So this is when we actually get to see Kiraz and Anne interact. You know, and she's like, where have you been? Like, were you wandering off again in the forest? And she's like, yeah, but a man brought me home. And she's like,
what man?
What man? And she points to Serkan, but he's hidden by trees and like, you know, greenery and all that. So she just sees a random dude as far as Ed is concerned.
Yeah.
But she's like, I do love that she's like, okay, I'm glad you're here, but listen, let's not get into cars with strangers anymore. And then she's like, he has such a cool last name, Mom. And she's about to say what it is. And then we get to see Melo, who is clearly a beloved Teze to our Kiraz. And she's like, this girl has me chasing her all over the place. So, you know, we get even more of a picture of just the kind of gregarious, filled with life little girl that Kiraz is. Energetic.
Yes. Yeah, she obviously runs everyone ragged. Or runs Melo ragged, at least.
So, she basically is all scattered, you know. Kiraz winds up telling Edda, like, she wants to bake a cake. That's why she went and got these blackberries. And so, you know, Melo's going to bake the cake with her. They kind of run off and do that. And I said, oh, she made a Sachma cake, like what Edda would make with the girl. Like, just,
Oh,
like that's what it made me think of, is like they just gathered their ingredients.
I forgot about that.
So I don't know if that was the purpose, but
well, I think it was, because later they talk about what they put in the cake.
And she's like, "There's raw eggs in there. Go ahead, eat it." Like, so I was like, "It's a Sajma cake."
Yeah, because later on, Melo's like, "You don't even want to know what's in this cake. Let me tell you." And then it cuts off. But
right.
Oh man, I love that.
Yeah. So when she's baking the cake or the cake is baked and they're singing her praises and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. I love it because at this point, I think Ifer's arrived. Barack is there. Melo's there. They're all just kind of hanging out at the cafe there at the hotel.
Right.
And from what I can understand, the cafe, Ifer runs it seems like. And maybe she and Barack co-own it or something.
Yeah.
It's not super clear, but they kind of run the cafe together. So, it's funny, though, because he brings her a present, and it's full of magic stuff. So we then learn that Kiraz, enjoys magic tricks.
Yes.
And listen, you guys, I know, just like her dad, she loves it. Listen,
say it live, Kristen.
Listen, she could still be adopted, okay? Now, listen.
Oh, my gosh.
I know I'm wrong. And I'm not even, this is what's funny. People think I'm like, this is what it is at this point. You know that Michael Scott scene when Pam's like, "Stop dating my mom," and he's like, "You know what? Yes, I'm going to date her even harder."
It's because people are telling you.
Mm-hmm. People are telling me, and I'm like, listen, it is
being stubborn.
Yes, it is still possible. It's very highly unlikely because she shares way too many attributes with Serkan.
Yeah.
And yes, they are attributes she could share with him if they're not related, which is why I'm like, hey guys, guess what? There's still a 0.0003% chance this is possible.
Yeah.
So I won't let go of that teeny tiny thing until I see a pregnant Edda flashback or her in labor or something like that. But please let it be known. Please don't be concerned for my intelligence. I know she's not adopted. Honestly, it's the crux of the angst for this season that she is not adopted and that she is his biological child. So, absolutely. And you all know we love extravaganzas here. So I am all for her being biologically his. Yeah. I just love seeing how worked up people get when I bring up the logic of adoption also.
So funny.
So anyways, she's into magic. Another sign that she's definitely Serkan's daughter.
She supposedly is really good at making money.
Yes.
And coming up with schemes to be rich in the future.
Uh-huh.
Because Melo says something about that it must be genetic. And Ifer's panties are immediately twisted.
Yeah, can we talk about, I'm like, oh, okay, Ifer's back.
Yeah, whatever. We don't even need to talk about it.
No, we do not.
Who cares?
No.
But, so we're already starting to see the allusions to her parentage here from the beginning.
Yes. So Serkan finishes his meeting.
Mm-hmm. Melo is flirting and distracted as she's trying to keep an eye on Kiraz. And we have the moment. The first moment when Serkan looks over and sees Edda. Of course, he doesn't believe his eyes. Mm-hmm. He thinks he's hallucinating.
Been seeing her for 5 years.
Well, and even just that day, he thought he just thought he saw her earlier. He saw the balloons with her name.
Yep.
It's all this stuff, and so he's like, of course, Serkan, don't be ridiculous. It's not her, and he's kind of trying to talk himself out of it. And then she looks at him. And he realizes.
It still takes him so long because he's like, now she's looking at me, and he still looks away again, looks back over, and he's like, man, these she's gorgeous. These hallucinations are getting super real. Because up until then, when the person turns around or whatever, he then realizes that it's not her.
Right.
So I think
it happens a lot.
Right.
If he is having to talk himself through it.
For 2 minutes.
Yep.
So I love this because he's seeing her in a garden that she has designed, which back in episode 5, what did he say? I mean, I know this is slightly different, but he tells her, he'd be honored to walk through a garden that she designed one day.
Right.
And while this isn't necessarily what he meant when he said that,
right.
I love that it's the callback to that. I got a lot of callbacks to episode 5, this episode, but she's literally tending this garden right now.
Yep.
And this is when he sees her. And it's such a simple reunion. They're just outside.
Mm-hmm.
around a bunch of flowers. And when she says his name, I think finally is when he's
That's
like,
kind of when the trance is broken.
Yes. Yeah. And he like realizes it's you. And he I think he actually says
he says it's really you.
It's really you. Yeah. And so when that, and you see the shift in his eyes when he's like, Gel, like he,
yes.
And then they hug.
That initial hug.
That initial hug. And that said so much because she is so overwhelmed. She is like, she's got tears in her eyes that won't, they're, you know, she's trying to keep them at bay.
Yeah.
She's clearly feeling entirely differently about this than he is because he is like smiling that it's actually her. He is like in disbelief in a whole different way.
Yeah.
So that already tells us right there, they are on two different planets as far as what this is.
It's very clear from the start, their perspectives on their parting.
Yes.
And the time that has passed since then.
Yes.
It's so clear.
Just in that hug.
The whole time, every interaction he has with her, he's happy to see her and he's excited and there's no sense of dread whatsoever coming off of him.
Yep. Just a little bit in the car where he's like questioning.
Sure.
Like, what am I doing?
Yes, and kind of like, you know, I'll be careful and I'm not going to fall in love again.
Right.
Because I'm back to the old Serkan, everything's fine. But for her, you can see the deep hurt that is still there.
Very much there and much closer to the surface than she would like it to be.
Yeah.
So, you know, but bless you. Bless you. Bless you. So, you know, it's interesting because he is like, wait, weren't you in Italy? And she's like, well, no, not right now, like for work. Basically, she implies that that's why she's here. And she makes sure to constantly change the subject when because I think there's something else I want to say he asks, but she just basically is like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
And, you know, he's like, oh, well, this is actually, you know, we're doing the architecture. And she's like, of course you are. I'm doing the landscape, you know, where they're both kind of like, oh, duh, that makes sense. And he's like, this is Pearl's project. Have you two not crossed paths? And she's like, no. But later on, it's pretty clear they have.
Yeah.
But I love that we were kind of tricked here.
Yeah.
Because for all intents and purposes, she did not look like, oh, shoot, I need to lie about this. She literally is like, no, I haven't. And so Serkan is like, it's been so long. Like, do you have time? Maybe we can get coffee. And she's hesitant. Like, I don't really know.
Right.
And he's like, but we can, it's been years. Can we just catch up like two adults? Can I say how much I love that our writing team is bringing us everything we have been begging for more than 10 episodes. And that is communication.
Like adults.
So
and he uses that phrase multiple times.
Yes, he does.
Episode.
Now, she does eventually agree because Karaz is off running in the background. And
yes,
so
she suddenly has motivation.
Right. It's more like, yep, let's go. And you know what?
And let's go right now.
And let's get off the property. Because he's like, well, there's a cafe right here, which is Ifer's cafe. So obviously they can't go there.
Right.
And so she's like, no, I think I need to get off the property for a bit. I've been working a lot. You go wait in the parking lot and I'll be right there.
Yes.
And he's like, okay. He's already kind of got his little spidey senses tingling. Right. But hey, she's going to go to coffee. You know, it's good.
So Eda makes a phone call. Or no, Melo comes and finds her, and Eda's kind of like in a trance.
Yes.
And when she finally snaps out of it, she's like, you need to get Kiraz out of here right now. And she doesn't tell Melo anything. She just is really showing how urgent this is, and she needs to be gone. I'll catch you up later. Please just get her out of here.
Yeah.
So then we get... do we want to cover this right now?
Yeah, I was going to say, okay.
It's just real quick.
Yeah. Are you talking about Aidan and Kemal?
Yes.
Okay. So, can I say, this is my own speculation, obviously. But I kind of love that Aidan's been dumb and stupid, like, and been hiding Kemal for 5 years. God bless that saint of a man for putting up with it for that long.
Yeah. And good for him for finally standing up for himself.
Yes, that's what I really loved. Yes, where he's like, because basically they've been together, it seems, this entire time. they've traveled a lot, things like that. But she still hasn't told Serkan about them.
Right. They've been, quote, hiding things.
Right. He knows, right?
He absolutely knows.
He absolutely knows.
When
they have that interaction in the garden.
Yes.
Okay.
Where he's like, oh.
Let me give you time to come.
Tell me, yes. Mm-hmm. Why don't you tell me why you're here, Mom? I'll give you some time for an explanation to give me about why you're here. And so he absolutely knows.
Well, and even the way he looks when he's like, Kemal Bey, and he's like, Serkan Bey, and
Well, and the second Aydan is like, what is she says like, oh, I happened to come across Kemal Bey. He rolls his eyes.
Yes.
And I'm like,
and
okay.
So, and even Engin gets a look on his face. So I'm like, okay, this is like a Friends, Chandler and Monica situation. Like, they don't know that we know that they know we know.
Exactly.
Like, but they know.
Exactly.
Because it's obvious.
Yes.
So yeah. But I love that he's clearly waiting for her to just be like, hey, I'm in a relationship with this man. So he can be like, yeah, duh, Mom.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you just tell me?
Yeah.
Like, I've known for a long time.
Yeah. You don't think you're as sneaky as you think you are.
Right.
Or you're not as sneaky as you think you are.
And part of me wonders if Kemal also knows. Like, I mean, I know he put on that whole show, like, I'm going to go talk to Serkan,
Right.
But I almost wonder if that was more just to light the fire under her to do it.
Maybe.
Because I feel like maybe he and Kemal have had a conversation about this already. Or maybe Kemal's
just going to be like, look, you know this, right?
Right. Or just Kemal has this sense of like, I know he has to know already.
Right.
But yeah, okay. So we are on the same page with that.
Yes.
That he clearly knows.
That
okay.
I was suspicious from the start, but that conversation in the garden, I was like, he for sure knows. Mm-hmm. He wasn't born yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
But that's kind of it. And then Seifi is a third wheel the whole time.
Yeah.
For poor Kemal.
I know. Poor Kemal. 3 is a crowd, not company. So that's that. I know we got that little flash too to Engin and Pearl getting home where we get to really see the kind of picture of the kind of parents they are, which is, we kind of touched on that, exactly how I would picture them.
Yes. And they're still very much in love.
Yes. But they have their bickering that.
Absolutely.
Just everything that makes them classic them.
Yes.
So,
So now we can get back to Ed's.
Yes. Okay.
So the drive time to getting coffee.
Yes. So, okay. Sorry, some of this is a little out of order, so I need to get to this. But, basically, they're in the car, and it's all inner dialogue.
Yes.
So.
And it's a parallel scene. Like, man, I didn't realize how much I missed
We missed those, where they're having the same type of thoughts, but again, seeing their completely different perspectives on what this is.
Yep.
Because, she says, what am I doing in this car? What am I doing with you after all these years? And do you have him? Do you have his stuff?
He says, where am I going? What am I doing? And then, well, this is him, right? Why did you suggest coffee? What's left for us to talk about?
And then out loud he says, if it's too windy for you, I can close the hatch if you want. So we get a flashback. And of course we know she doesn't need it shut because she's Edda and likes her hair blowing. But it goes beyond that.
Yeah.
She just says, no, that's okay. But then in her head, she says, is it windy for me? I'm freezing. I'm on fire. Like, she's both. Does that even bother you? You burned with your huge ego. You broke and passed right through me. Whatever you do, I will not be deceived by you again.
And then he says, no, that's him.
Oh, that is him that says that.
He says, whatever you do, I won't be deceived by you again. I won't knock on this door again.
And then she says, no more knocking on my door. The old Edda is gone. The one who begs you, the one you hurt. But she came back every time.
And he says, since you left, I found myself, became the former Serkan. Yeah, right. You might think so, buddy. Falling in love again? Never. And he's got this self-satisfied smirk on his face as he's thinking that.
And then she's thinking the exact same thing. Falling in love again? Never. Now, he says, yeah, I became the old Serkan. But the thing is, what he is the version of Serkan he was afraid of becoming in 24, where he's like, if you're not touching my heart, like I have no choice. Like to go back to my old ways, but I won't be able to fully go back to them because I'll basically like, I know what it is to have you in my life and touching my heart. So I won't ever be able to fully go back to that.
Yep.
So, you know, he's fooling himself into thinking that's what he's doing.
Right. Because he's thinking that he's protecting himself.
Absolutely.
And it's back to Serkan putting that cage around his heart.
Yep.
Putting that cover over his rose, so to speak, to protect it.
Yep. Well, and I found this passage specifically from
Madonna
and Fur Coat. Thank you. And he basically says, and so it was that spoilers, you guys, if you haven't read this, okay? And so it was that I slipped back into the life I'd led before meeting Maria, is her name. My days were just as empty and aimless as before, but also more painful because there was a difference. I had believed in my ignorance that there was nothing more to life than this. I was suffering now because I knew that there was another way to live. I no longer took any notice of my surroundings. The joys of life were forever closed to me. For a brief while, a woman had pulled me out of listless lethargy. She had taught me that I was a man, or rather a human being. She had shown me that the world was not as absurd as I had previously thought, and that I had the capacity for joy. But from the moment we lost touch, I lost the benefit of her influence. I went back to my old ways, but I still understood just how desperately I needed her. I was not the sort of man who could walk through life alone. I needed her at my side. I could not live without her support, yet somehow I carried on living, as you can see. If this can be called living, then this is what I did.
That is great.
Yep. Only the next line is, I never heard from Maria again. So obviously our story is going to go
in a much different direction.
But it's clear to see where we're headed. And then earlier in the book, he's talking about when he first met her and how she swept me away from my dark and silent world, delivering me to the land of truth and light. And now she had vanished, offering no reasons, as suddenly as she had come. You know, and I almost wonder if that's what Serkan's perspective is going to be, that she just, because we don't really know his yet. This episode was mostly about Edda getting to say her piece. We see a lot. All the flashbacks are Edda's flashbacks, not Serkan's. And I believe his are coming.
I have a feeling we'll get more of his perspective in the next episode. Yeah,
I agree. I think we're gonna get a lot of back and forth with that. I'm not worried about that at all because Aisha's always been good about giving us both perspectives.
Oh yeah.
And so, but this episode's more about Edda's, and so I'm curious because there's even some things he said. Well, he says something about later on in his head about. Or maybe he says it in the car, somewhere where he says about not trusting her again. So to me, I'm like, okay, clearly he has there's something in his perspective,
right,
that he saw as her like breaking his trust somehow, like,
sure.
And whether that was because she actually left, even though it seems like he was doing everything he could to push her away.
But we know how Serkan's perspective is going to be skewed with something like that because of his past,
right,
and because of his issues with attachment and abandonment. Exactly. So her leaving him is gonna be completely devastating to him specifically in a way that it might not be to other people,
right? Because
like when he was sick and he's feverish and he's like, don't leave me, that was a deeper statement.
In episode 11.
We know as viewers that was a deeper statement
than
him
just
being sick and like, no, don't go. He's like, no, don't leave me, everybody else has left me in my life.
Because then he has that dream where his family left him and shipped him off to boarding school.
Yep.
Good point. So anyways, so after they have those after they have their little thought things, thought bubbles,
and it gets a little sticky on her hands. And she's like, oh, this is, because clearly she knows this is out of character for Serkan's car.
Absolutely.
And he's like, oh, yeah, there was this, I had to take this, there was this little girl this morning picking blackberries. I had to take her to her mother. So she got in the car, and of course, now it's sticky everywhere. And she's like, today? And he's like, yeah, she was a real piece of work. Like, she was a real disaster.
And do you love mind you, this woman hasn't told this man in 5 years he's a father, but she's offended.
Yes.
That he's calling.
She's like, oh, I see your love for children hasn't gone away.
And we get one of his first perspectives about kids, and he's like, the world's overpopulated, Edda. We don't need to add to it.
Right.
So clearly that's only one aspect of it.
Yes.
Because you wouldn't just, I'm sorry, that she wouldn't just not tell him about a kid because he's like, overpopulation. There's clearly going to be more to why she didn't tell him.
Yes.
I think that's just one of the many things. But, you know, and also we know that he sees this clearly because he even tells Pearl at the beginning, like, yeah, people with kids are always in trouble. Like, there's always drama. There's always issues. Like,
yes.
You know, so.
Like, you poor idiots with your children.
Well, and, you know, let's go back to episode 17, was it? When they're taking care of that baby?
Mm-hmm.
Like, hello. He's like, this is disgusting. And he's like marching up the stairs because there's spit up on his shoulder. And, you know, and he's like, they're better to look at from afar. Like,
yeah. And he sees their marriage, and he's like, great, look at their relationship. Now that they have kids, it's ruined. And he clearly has a very bad perspective of how a relationship is once children have entered the situation.
And who can blame him? Because look at his parents. Mm-hmm. Like, they lost one, and they basically forgot about their other one and shipped him off. So, of course, he's going to think, like, kids ruin a relationship and ruin, you know. So, again, I don't mean this in any jerky way. I promise. I'm not trying to be mean. But to me, this makes sense. I know a lot of people are like, there's a lot of people who are like, this isn't Serkan. This is out of character. He wanted kids. Like, and I know the Serkan of the 30s wanted kids. But almost everything about the 30s, there were so many things that were so out of character with all of our characters. Right. So, you know, and not that I'm saying that every single event that's happened by other writers needs to be disregarded, because that's just not logical. And it's not disregarded. Otherwise the brain tumor wouldn't exist.
Right.
We even get a flashback with the ring tattoo. So clearly something happened to get those removed or faded or whatever. Right. They weren't just being ignored.
Right.
You know, we even get flashbacks to, you know, the bookcase and broken lamp night and when they threw the bottles in the ocean in the season finale.
Yeah.
So it's not character writing being disregarded, but it is far more in character for Serkan to feel this way about
Very
kids,
much so.
Especially when you add in the fact that he had to face death.
Yes.
The fact that, you know, so it's like, it would make sense that he would clearly already dealing with the fears and things that he is, that he would also be like, we don't need to bring a kid into this. Like, this could come back and then I'm going to leave my kid just like my parents, like, abandoned me. No, never, you know? But
or what if my kid also ends up with a brain tumor? Or what if
I pass this on?
There are so many.
Because he had a brother who died from an illness, and then Serkan got an illness. So clearly there's genetics at play here too, that I can totally understand why he would have that internal struggle and maybe more or less voice it as like, well, the world's overpopulated and kids are just more trouble than they're worth.
Exactly.
Because it's way easier to put up those walls.
Totally.
Than to admit the vulnerability of those things. So, anyways, I wanted to put that out there.
No, I fully agree. So then we get them sitting down for coffee and their conversation. They kind of catch each other up on everybody. Right. Engin and Pearl. He tells her about the fact that Engin is a stay-at-home dad now.
Which I just love.
Because they figured out that Pearl does more work.
Shocking. We've known this forever.
I thought that was hilarious that they basically evaluated who was a better asset to the company.
Yeah.
And she's like, sorry, I win. You stay home.
Which, nobody here in this podcast is shocked. But, And, okay, so I know there were, and again, I'll offer my perspective on this. There were a lot of people who were very upset about the fact that the way Layla was explained leaving was because Erdem cheated on her and then she quit, which left Serkan in the lurch.
I was very satisfied with that, honestly.
Okay, do you want to know why I was very satisfied with that?
Because it shows how ridiculous it was.
Thank you. Yes, I just thought to myself, okay, what that says to me is, that storyline was so asinine that it's going to get
out there.
Yes, it's going to also get an asinine
explanation.
Yeah. Because yes, honestly, it would have been more like if Layla cheated on him, or if Layla was like, I can do a lot better than you.
Right.
See ya.
Yeah.
And then got this like crazy amazing job offer.
Yes.
And, you know, if that's your headcanon and that's what happened in your alternate universe, that is awesome.
That's fine.
But honestly, to me, what that said was, yeah, let's just acknowledge how stupid this storyline was and the fact that that's never what was supposed to be.
And have something just as ridiculous happen where Erdem is cheating. And, of course, Eda is like, oh, Erdem cheated on Layla? Okay. So I felt like it was a nod to the fandom in a way.
I
honestly.
Appreciated the shade. Yeah. Let's just say that. If that's what it was. Obviously, we're speculating from our own, you know.
This whole thing, I felt like, was shade. With Pearl being the more responsible, more productive person in the company. With Erdem supposedly cheating on Layla. And then Denise, with Jaren and Farit being together. And being happy together in London.
And having a baby.
And everything is lovely and fine between the two of them. I was like,
yes.
Oh, I
because
love everything.
that is what pre-30s Jaren deserved. That is what all of Farit has always deserved.
Yes.
So
I mean, how many times have we said justice for Farit?
I know.
And he got it. So this whole thing, I was like,
yes,
beautiful.
I am sad that he's gone, but because we knew Jaren was gonna have to be gone because she, you know, she has a bigger role now in a new show, which is, you know, congratulations to her.
Right.
But that means if Farit were to stay, then they would have had to explain.
He would still be alone.
Yeah, he'd be alone. So, I hope Charit has a great job offer coming or another project because I would love to see him in something. But yeah, I'm just really, Farit got the HEA he deserved.
I know. So good.
So good. So, you know, they are chatting more about that. And then I love it because Serkan starts listing off her accomplishments. Well, first she asks him how he is because he
keeps trying to do small talk because he's like, how's your aunt? How's Melo?
Well, and that's where she stops the small talk.
Yeah.
Because she was small talking before.
She's like, Serkan, how are you?
Yep.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we find out he's healthy, he's good. And she, under her breath, is like, yeah, like I told you. And I kind of love that because, again, we get another perspective of where he was at with his illness and where she was at with it.
Yes.
And then he starts listing all of her accomplishments because he's like, well, why aren't you still in Italy? And starts listing all this stuff that she's done. And she's like, have you been keeping track of me? Which the clear resounding answer to that is yes. But of course he explains it by like, well, I read international magazines, so of course I'm going to come across articles about you.
Sure.
And he's like, why would you leave with all that success? And if this answer is not the epitome of the Eda we met from day one.
Yep.
She says, success isn't just measured by work for me. Like, that's not just the definition of success for me. And I love that because he's like, yeah, but I see all these things that you've done. And then, you know, you're here. It's a waste of talent in your career. And she's like, excuse me?
A waste?
And he, you know, he does say, you know what, forgive me, that was harsh. Like, he does backtrack a smidge.
Sure.
And she's like, and this right here, the blowing dagger, I chose to live. That's what success is for me.
Yep. And, okay, so this is the first inkling of Serkan that we used to know, the Serkan that he tends to revert to, where work is success and success is measured in material things or in progression in career and things like that, where he's like, okay, this is a tangible thing for me to measure success with. So that's how he's using it, and that's why he's confused by Eda. So let's just put a pin in that.
Yes. So then we get these, you know, because they're at this restaurant by the ocean, which is, of course, kind of a nod to the first time they go. It's in episode 2, I'm pretty sure, when they, you know, are at that lunch. And
and he's not even paying attention to the view, and she's like, wow, look at this, it's always changing, why wouldn't you be distracted by this or love to be here and look at this amazing view?
Well, and they get there's these flashbacks to Antalya and you know, when he carries her off and then when they throw the bottles in the ocean, and when that comes back up, that's when she's like, okay, or he
says, do you remember that day?
So they're both clearly thinking about it. But she's just like,
no,
are
I'm
you
not going there? Yeah.
She's like, are you coming back here? Meaning like to Sheila, like, because she's just concerned about, crap, what am I going to do? about Kiraz. You know that's what she's thinking. And I love it because he then shifts the subject and he
tells her how beautiful she is.
Which, of course, I did love that. And he's like, it's been 5 years and you're still just as beautiful.
And she's like, stop being, don't say any nonsense. And he's like, I'm just saying what's on the mind of every man.
Uh-huh. And she's like, every man, of course. Mm-hmm.
And then he's like, is there someone in your life?
Of course, because Serkan Polat can't just leave well enough alone.
And she gets his number. She's like, okay, I understand now. Of course, this is where the conversation is going to lead.
Yep.
Of course. And he's like, of course we're going to go to this topic. It's been 5 years.
It's just a simple question.
But
it's not.
Or is there not? And she's like, after 5 years, you're sitting in front of me as if nothing has happened, and you're asking if someone is in my life. Are we really at this point? And he's like, we're not anywhere, Eda. Like normal people, we're just sitting down and talking for 5 minutes. And she's like, are we normal people, Serkan? And of course they're not.
Of course they're not.
She's like, after all we've been through. And he's like, no, please continue.
Because she kind of stops, like, I'm not going to go there.
Yeah. She's like, what was, okay? And he's like, no, Eda, it's clear that you have something to tell me. So tell me. And this is another thing that we haven't seen for a while, where he can tell things about her without her saying them. He can tell when she's keeping things from him.
Right.
He can tell when she's not being 100% honest.
Right. Just like he knew during episode 24
Yep.
with Baba Ane. He knew that she wasn't giving him the full story, and he kept doing everything he could to be like, listen, if we're in this together, we can get through this.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so she, at this point, she's just kind of done.
She's going to unleash.
Yeah, because she's like, I'm not going to tell him anything. And so she says, what are we doing here? She's like, after all these years, you invite me for coffee, and I came. And not only am I broken, but do you want me just absolutely torn apart?
And again, a whole where we get the confirmation that their perspectives on what has transpired in the last 5 years are entirely different, because he says, you're right, our past is in the past, but we parted amicably.
Yeah.
And we parted quite nicely and beautifully. Isn't that true? And she's just, you can just tell she's, because she's like, I just want to leave. I just want to go. And she flags the waiter, asks for the bill.
Yep.
And he says, we wanted
his perspective.
Yep. We wanted to love, and look where it took us. And she says, what do you understand about love, Serkan Polat? And you know what? I right here when he's like, really, Eda? Because, the fact of the matter is, whatever's transpired over this gap of time we've missed, they did love each other at one point. And, they clearly still do. But, and so she says, yes. And she says, look, I don't want to remember you like this. So clearly, again, she's done what she can to hold on to the good things, and obviously she's seeing all the good things every day in Kiraz. You know what I mean? So that makes it easier to hold on to the best parts of Serkan,
like minute reminders
of the best parts of him.
Yes,
so she's like, I don't want to remember you like this, and I don't want it to be this way. And she says, now what she means here to me is she means this coffee date.
Yes, that was what I thought too. Yeah,
us meeting was a mistake from the get-go, meaning that I shouldn't have agreed to come to this coffee date.
Right.
He, of course, then takes offense.
And of course,
takes it a step further.
Yep. And he's like, a mistake? He's like, actually, do you know what the mistake was? Do you remember that day at the presentation? Meaning the very first day they ever interacted.
At the college.
He's like, the mistake is that after that day, I allowed you to come into my life.
This is the mistake.
Is the mistake. And she's like, get out of here.
Well, the look on her face first, though, she's clearly devastated by that, but she's like,
that he would say
I need to collect myself. And and she's like, that's it. I'm out of here. Yep. And she storms out like she should. Like, you invited me to this coffee, and then you're going to tell me that from the very beginning years ago, all of this was a mistake. Then why did you even bring me here?
Exactly.
But of course, they're both lashing out because they're hurt, and there are still things that they need to talk about.
Yeah, and it's their first interaction after 5 years.
Exactly.
Of course, it's not going to go smoothly.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
So, we switch over to something a little more lighthearted. Aengon and Pearl, basically, we kind of get more perspective of their life with a kid. Yes. But it's also clear they haven't had alone time in a long time.
Right.
And so basically this whole interaction leads to Peril, who's basically the female Serkon, being like, hey, why don't we send Jon to your mom's and like let's have a date night? And Aengon's like, yeah, let's do that right now.
And he's like, all right, Jon, let's get you
let's get you to grandma's. So I love that. So we get a quick flash to Serkon driving away upset. Edda's not in the car. Obviously, she found her own way back to the hotel. Right. Edda comes back home, and again, more lightheartedness because Kiraz has prepared a magic show, so she gets to sit down and just kind of do her mom thing and decompress from that.
But of course, nothing cannot remind her of Serkon because the first magic trick is a disappearing necklace.
And we get the flashback to when Serkon did that in episode 3.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's just basically a whole montage of all her cute magic tricks, hocus pocus, and all her adorableness.
Yes.
And then at the end, of course, she's like, okay, well, you guys enjoyed the show, then open your pockets. There's the business sense in her.
Yeah.
So she goes around collecting money. It's all very cute.
And then
there's more genetic talk too, I think.
There is.
From Edda this time. And Ifair, because she tries to shut it down. I'm like, listen, you don't get to shut that down when she's talking about her own child. Thank you very much. And I love that Edda's like, what? I can say his name and acknowledge this because she is just like him.
Yep.
You know, and I get what Ifair's saying when she's like, no, my Kiraz isn't like anyone. She's like herself, which yes, that is also true.
She is. Yeah. But we also carry the characteristics of our parents.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's a very common thing.
And did you want to slap Ifair after this next part?
Look, I understand it.
Booba.
Because they do, obviously, Brock is a nice guy.
And he has a connection with Kiraz.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I understand because even Melo is on that train and is like, well,
he's a nice guy,
blah, blah, blah. But we all know that doesn't necessarily mean that that two people should be together.
Right.
So I get it. It's still very annoying. And I was annoyed with Ifair and Idon with the animosity towards Edda and Serkon. Because honestly, like, it's between them.
And on top of that, like, it's pretty clear that they both have, because again, like, while one of the things I desperately missed in Aisha's writing is that even when the characters are doing, and this is a summarization of Krisha's DZ Law review.
Okay.
But she basically said, like, the thing with Aisha's characters is that even when they're doing things we don't like or agree with, we understand them.
Yep.
They don't just do things to piss us off for the sake of a plot.
Right.
It's like, you know, for example, in episode 14, when Serkon breaks up with Edda, of course we all were like, oh my gosh, you need to just tell her the truth.
Yeah.
But so as much as we disagreed with it and knew he was wrong in not telling her, we understood that what he was doing was what he thought was protecting her by him taking on all of her hate, him taking on all of her anger because she'll get over me because I'm not worthy of her love anyways.
Yep.
But she'll never get over the fact that this is how her parents were taken from her, and her knowing that isn't going to bring them back. So I'd rather have her angry and hateful to me for the rest of her life than bring this pain to her.
Yep. And honestly, this is realistic character writing.
Yes.
This is good character writing.
Yes.
Because if you have a character who's just perfect all the time, that's not realistic.
No.
And frankly, I don't want a perfect character. Right. I like gray characters.
Yep.
I like characters that reflect the world back to me.
Right.
Because they're nuanced, because because they make mistakes, because maybe they jump to conclusions that they shouldn't, because maybe they have abandonment issues. So to me, that is a better reflection of the world that we see around us and in relationships that we have to other people than somebody who's just going to be perfect all the time and always understands the perspective of everybody else and reacts in the perfect exact way that they should.
Yep.
I'm sorry, but that's not realistic.
No, it's not. And while, no, we don't read romance novels and watch DZs for 100% realism.
Right.
We do want some relatability.
Absolutely.
And, you know, so yeah, like, what are the chances that a famous landscape architect would be able to, who's clearly having all these articles written about it, would be able to keep it private knowledge that she has a child? Like, sure. You know what I mean? And like Sarah Khan not having the means, if he's kept tabs on her, the fact that he wouldn't have seen, anything about her.
Kid by her.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, there are things where we do need to suspend our belief.
Of course. Because there is that element of fantasy.
Yes. But in their characters and who they are as people,
yes,
I want someone that seems relatable in certain aspects. Like, yeah, I want things about them that also make them perfect and, unattainable in real life, because that's part of the fun of fiction.
Exactly.
But not with things like this. And so, sorry. So it's like for me with Ida and Ifair, I'm like, come on, if we can see that they both have legs to stand on in this, yes, you can hate that your son was hurt by this. Yes, you can hate that your niece was clearly has suffered and had to make a very difficult decision to raise a child on her own without even, why can't I spit the words out? Without even telling her father that she exists. Like, but, and while Ada is impulsive, this was not a decision she made out of impulsivity, because she had to make a decision that clearly meant the safety and well-being, not just for her, but for her daughter. So, and I think, that'll become clear as the episodes unfold. But
definitely.
Yeah, so it's like with Ida and Ifair, like, I'm like, oh, okay, you two. But I also think that we're going to see that proper growth happen in them. So I kind of see why we had to be reset with them a little bit.
Sure.
Too,
Yeah. So we get that whole conversation. Where obviously one of the reasons Barack is there is to be a potential for Eda, or a theoretic potential for Eda.
But yeah, we all know better.
Yeah. So Engen and Peril, poor people,
they can't even get it on.
Yeah, their night gets ruined by Serkan.
Clueless Serkan.
Yeah. And at that point, when he and Engen talk, then again we get kind of a parallel situation where, because Eda calls Peril, and this is where we find out that they certainly clearly have been each other.
It's still not clear if she knows about Kiraz, but that they've at least kept in touch over the years, if anything professionally, because I'm sure they've probably crossed paths professionally in the last 5 years.
Of course.
So, yeah, I do like that Pearl's like, let me go outside, and then that's when Eda calls, and then Serkan and Engen are in the house.
Yeah.
And we get the whole, we're having the same conversation but clearly from entirely different perspectives. Totally different.
Yeah.
Because Eda's like, Serkan came here. And Pearl's like, what?
Yep.
And then inside the house.
He's like, I saw Eda today. And then Engen's like, wait. What do you mean you saw Eda? And he's like, yeah, she returned from Italy a long time ago, and I didn't know. And we get Eda.
I froze when I saw him in front of me.
And he says, at first, I thought I was hallucinating.
And she says, my arms and legs just, turned to jelly. And I couldn't even breathe for a few seconds.
He says, you know what's the strangest thing? After years, we see each other as if nothing has changed.
And Eda says, after all these years, so much has changed.
I was like, oh, Serkan. He says, she was right next to me and I didn't even know.
And she says, he really shouldn't come into my life again. And Pearl's telling her, don't worry. This is, this happened outside of my control. I promise you he's not going to enter your life anymore. This is my project. He doesn't need to go there again, okay? And so, she says, okay. And then
back in the house, Engen's like, okay, I understand, brother. It's a very difficult situation. But after all, you made a decision years ago. You need to stand behind your decision. He's like, don't go to the hotel anymore. Don't see her again. There's no need to confuse thoughts, excuse me.
But Serkan just kind of gets a look on his face where he's like...
he's in stubborn Serkan mode.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, we get, after this, she, phone calls hang up and we get story time with Kuraz.
Yes.
And she asks to read her favorite book, which is, of course, Küçük Prens.
Yes.
And what she winds up reading
is not in the book.
Is in the book. It took me forever to find it, but I found it.
Where is it? Because I have a different section.
Page 20. Open up to page 20, where she says, I know a planet where the little prince says to the narrator, I know a planet inhabited by a red-faced gentleman.
Oh.
He's never smelled, it took me 2 hours to find this, Ashley. He's never smelled a flower. He never looked at a star. He's never loved anyone. He's never done anything except add up numbers. And all day long, he says over and over, just like you, I'm a serious man. I'm a serious man. And he puffs himself up with pride. But he's not a man at all. He's a mushroom. So then I was like, okay, let me see if someone has done some analysis on this whole calling him a mushroom thing. And I love it because on schmoop.com, somebody...
That's funny. Schmoop is a curriculum for high schoolers.
Oh, well, yeah. So, because this is like breaking down a lot of stuff in The Little Prince, but I specifically looked up this part. And it says, The Little Prince compares this man to a parasitic plant, and this is certainly the only mean thing the prince says in the book. He's really upset by the businessman's insensitivity to beauty, his pseudo-logic, and his greed. If the businessman were collecting stars because he thought they were beautiful, perhaps the prince would have forgiven him. But the businessman has no appreciation for the stars at all. He only wants the satisfaction of owning them, which obviously it's not really stars for Serkan as much as it is work and buildings and, prestige and all this other stuff. Because that's, again, what you mentioned earlier, is this is what adds up to success for him.
Yes.
And so, I was like, okay, so this is him. We further on in the book, I think it's around page 36, is where we actually see the interaction between him and the businessman.
Yeah, that was the part that I was focusing on.
Yes.
Because all he's doing is calculations in his head, and that's his main focus. He keeps saying, I'm a serious man. I can't be bothered with trifles. And he's like, for 54 years, I've inhabited this planet, and I've been interrupted only 3 times. And he kind of explains why he was interrupted, and the Little Prince is the 3rd time he was interrupted. And he's like, so I'm too busy making my calculations, and what he does is he counts the stars.
Yep.
And the prince keeps asking, million what? 5 million, what are you talking about? Yep. And he's like, oh, those things that you sometimes see in the sky. And the Little Prince says, flies? No, those little shiny things. Bees? No, those little golden things that make lazy people daydream. Now, I'm a serious person. I have no time for daydreaming. And again, we get this perspective of this man who is so focused on the things that he deems are success that he can't pay attention to the beautiful things, the dreaming things. Yep. And the Little Prince says, you mean the stars? Yes, that's it, stars. And what do you do with 500 million stars? 501,622,731. Yep. I'm a serious person and I'm accurate. And what do you do with those stars? What do I do with them? Yes, nothing. I own them. You own the stars? Yes, but I've already seen a king kings don't own, they reign over. It's quite different. And what good does owning the stars do you? It does me the good of being rich. And what good does it do you to be rich? The Little Prince asks. It lets me buy other stars if somebody discovers them. And the Little Prince said to himself, this man argues a little like my drunkard. And the drunkard, if you read earlier, he is just kind of argumentative. He doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So the Little Prince ends up asking, how he even owns them, how they can even belong to him. And the businessman kind of explains in his bad logic and
his terrible Montic.
Right. And he talks about putting them in the bank, and he just writes the number of the stars that he owns on a slip of paper, and the Little Prince is like, oh, and that's all? And he says, that's enough. And so the Little Prince, in this, he's like, that's amusing, thought the Little Prince, and even poetic, but not very serious. The Little Prince had a very different idea about serious things from those from those of the grown-ups. I own a flower myself, he continued, which I water every day. I own 3 volcanoes, which I rake out every week. I even rake out the extinct one. You never know. So it's of some use to my volcanoes, and it's useful to my flower that I own them. But you are not useful to the stars.
That, when I read that line, I was like, it gave me chills. Because honestly, Serkan, when you're done with these buildings, when you've, created all this prestige for yourself, what use are you to it? Once you've completed the building, what good are you to it?
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
And so, and just like you said, this line from the website was said, the businessman can be seen as the epitome of grown-ups. He's obsessed with something that isn't actually important, and as a result, neglects the truly beautiful and important things around him. So, yeah, I've just missed this so much.
Yeah.
Because it so clearly describes where Serkan is at or trying to be in his life.
Well, and I love the fact that now in this situation, Serkan is no longer the prince. Eda is the prince.
Yep.
And she's also the one with the child.
Yeah.
And so this is where the childlike perspective is coming. Eda has always had this perspective of a dreamer and a stargazer and those things. But it's like we're kind of taken back to the beginning with all of this.
Yep. I agree. So before she reads the last part, we flash back over to Serkan. And, he is kind of like, he and Engin are trying to debate, does Peril know it? Like, did Peril know she's back? All this stuff. And Engin's like, no, she would have told me, which it becomes clearer and clearer, unless Engin's a very good liar, that only Peril knows.
Yeah.
So, and I love that she and Eda clearly maintained more than just a professional relationship. That makes me so happy.
Yeah, I like that she was kind of grafted into the girl.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I love that Engin points out, because he's like, has already told Serkan, you don't really need to go back there. And he's like, well, I am going to go back there. And he's like, why do you need to specifically be in Chile? We have businesses all over. We have work and stuff. And he starts naming off places that they've got business happening. And he's like, why are you so concerned with one hotel in Chile? Which Engin already
But this is where the truth comes out.
Right.
Because Serkan's like, she's hiding something from me.
But I love it because is it right here where Engin's like, what do you mean she's hiding something from you? Like, you have been apart for 5 years. Like, how can she be hiding something from you when she doesn't, like, owe you anything, basically?
Right.
Which, again, God bless him for pointing that stuff out.
Yeah.
So we flash back over to Eda and Kiraz, and she's reading. So we see how far they got in the book because she's reading from the passage that says, all men have stars, but they are not the same things for different people, which clearly after the passage you just read is very obvious.
Yes.
For some who are travelers, the stars are guides. For others, they are no more than little lights in the sky. For other people who are scholars, they are problems to be solved. But all these stars are silent. You alone will have stars as no one else has them. So I don't know. I just really love that. And, Kiraz, we kind of discover then is actually still awake as she's listening. And she asks her mom, which planet her dad is on now. And Eda tells her she thinks that he's on Uranus. And it's funny because Kiraz says, oh, that's fast. And that she wants to read him this book when he arrives. So it kind of seems like she thinks his arrival on Earth is getting closer and closer and more imminent. And someone, Divya S on Twitter, S_DNAIR 429, kind of broke this down more. And because she said, when she asks which planet is dad on now, she says, when Baba and Kiraz first meet, she tells Serkan that her dad is on Mars. And now Eda has now said that he's on Uranus.
Okay.
And so if you're following hopping the planets like that, it means he has just one more planet to complete. So I almost wonder if these are like the valleys in EK that
Or maybe in this situation, because the little prince goes from asteroid to asteroid, planet to planet, maybe she's thinking, oh, he only has so many left until he's on planet Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so he has just one to complete in the solar system, and then Serkan will get to know that Kiraz is his daughter. And, you know, she said after exploring Neptune, which is technically what would be next, he will be back home. And this time it won't take much time, as he's already gone exploring the planets, and his goal is home, his love, and his daughter. So I like the way that she broke that down.
Yeah.
Because, again, the astronaut thing made sense in the sense that Serkan has always had an interest in the stars and things like that. So that already just made it. But then to also be able to tie in the little prince to that, who, jumped from asteroid to asteroid until he... Well, and it's funny because Earth wasn't even really his final destination. It was getting back to his Rose. On his own planet.
Yep.
So, I really loved that. So, then what else does she ask? They start talking about, like, princesses and...
Well, because she says that she wants to read the story to her dad when he comes back. And she's like, yeah, that's great. And she says, I love books. And Edda says, I also really love books, and I love fairy tales, but never forget, we will believe in fairy tales, but what will we believe in the most? And then little Kiraz says, in yourself. And she says, yes, in yourself.
I loved that because, again, it was a callback to her speech in episode 20, was it? When she gives that whole speech to those girls in the school. And that's essentially the same message that she gave them.
Yeah.
So...
Well, and she says because princesses don't need anyone. They're able to do everything themselves. And then Kiraz says, what happens if the princess doesn't? And she says, well, if the princess devotes her whole life to the prince and all her happiness is in him, then the prince might get bored with her. The process is the same both internally and externally. And the princes are like a closed box. Nobody knows what they like.
And isn't it telling that when she's saying that line, Serkan is opening a locked safe and taking out what's important to him, symbolically.
Yep. And he's doing that as she is saying, what have they forgotten forever? Or what can they never forget?
And he is holding.
Yes.
So clearly he's kept that ever since he picked it up off of that boat when Edda took her telenovela dive into the ocean.
And he's kept it in a safe.
So he hasn't turned it back into a ring. So that's curious because she does mention later on when they got engaged. And I don't know if she meant when we saw them getting engaged. Right. I assumed it was the second time they got engaged because she said... You know, she mentions about how he kept putting off the date of the wedding.
Right.
So I'm like, I wonder what her ring was. Like, because clearly it wasn't that. Right. Because it's still a necklace.
Or if he was supposed to get around to turning it back into a ring.
And just never did.
But because of what was going on mentally, he just never did. Yeah.
So, but I love that we know he's kept it. So this is clearly, like, that Jewel is representative of everything that's important to him because it's pretty much the only thing inside that safe. Like,
yeah.
So I just love it. What a way to turn in the fact that I hated that it was turned into a necklace. But way to bring it full circle, so to speak.
Yeah.
So
the next morning, Engin and Pearl, Pearl ends up coming back inside, and she's like, oh, what do you mean you saw Edda? How could I possibly know she was there? Because they kind of start to put the fire to her feet, and she's like you've been there so many times and you haven't come across her. She's been there doing the landscaping.
But I love that she never fully lies.
Right.
Because she's like, what are you saying?
Yes.
Like, I mean...
Like, you know that I've been busy on this project.
So she doesn't ever deny seeing her, but it's very... shrewd because she's not just like, no, Serkan, I haven't. She's like, what are you implying, Serkan? As though she's offended by what he's implying. And
then she's like, forget it. I'm Engin. I'm going upstairs.
And Engin's like, get out of here. Because poor blue-balled Engin.
He's been kept away from his wife already for so long. And now Serkan, I love that he just leaves him on the couch too.
Me too.
Like, see yourself out, bro. I got a hot wife upstairs and you need to leave.
So freaking good. Oh my gosh, I love it.
Yeah. So then it's the next morning.
So now it's the next morning. And we meet Kerem, who is like her assistant, it seems, because he's kind of like helping plant things and stuff. Yeah. And
sounds like he's a little bit of a hoodlum, and like maybe Eda giving him a chance was like, hey, this will be your opportunity to go to college. And
see, I just assumed it meant like he was more just maybe she found someone like her down on his luck, couldn't really afford college. And so she's kind of taking him under her wing.
Maybe. And I just was laughing because his solution for everything is, I'll beat him up
I'll beat him up, I know. So like, that's true. Kind of you're right. You're right. Maybe, I didn't even think of it that way. I do love that, though, because he's clearly protective and appreciative of her. And so.
He calls her Eda sister.
Eda, yes. Eda Abla. And she even calls him Kardesh. So I do love that. It's very clearly established what their relationship is. Yeah. So, you know, he kind of flits off to do whatever it is she sent him to do. And Serkan walks in all breezy. Gosh. And he's like, Kolay gelsin. And she's like, you're back?
What world am I living in?
And he's like, here. Yep. And he's like, well, I was supposed to meet with, you know, the owner yesterday. I couldn't. So I'm back to take care of that today. And, you know, and she's like, what does he say? He says something because she says, oh, so now that your opinion's changed, I just have to adjust, right?
Right.
Which again indicates this isn't the first time she's had to make adjustments based on.
And she makes a comment like, wasn't it you who said we won't see each other again?
That's what it was. And then it's, so your opinion changed on that. And she's like, and I have to adjust. And he's like, if you want life to be easy for you. And, But then, you know, he softens a little because he sees a flower in her hair. I like that he asks if he can remove it.
Yeah.
And, of course, then we get a very classic. This totally brought me back to episode 9 or 10 when he's like, I always want you by my side, ... for work. And I got the same thing because he's like, can we try again? And she, like, looks up at him and he's like, to talk and have a rational conversation. Didn't go so well yesterday.
Yeah.
And... You know, I do like, well, first she's like, no, because he's like, okay, well, I'll be here all day. Think about it. And then kind of leaves it at that. So then Eda kind of gives him a heads up, right? This is when she's like, she calls Melo and is like, listen, Serkan is here. Yeah. Don't let
Kiraz out of here and my aunt.
Yes.
They need to stay home.
But of course, our dear sweet baby angel Melo is like, Anisha.
Yeah.
But then apparently, Anisha sounds a lot like a word for a type of noodle.
Yeah.
So then she sort of plays it off that, you know.
The Kesme Noodles. Yes. A Noodle Lover Foundation.
Yes, all this stuff.
iFair needs to cook noodles instead.
For Eda and all this other stuff. Yes. Yeah. So it becomes this whole thing. Engin and Pearl bring John to Art Life. And I don't remember exactly why they wind up having to bring him there.
I think they brought him on a whim to show where his parents work. I don't think he's been there ever. And then they all end up taking a trip to Chile as soon as Pearl finds out. Yeah.
The whole point of these next few scenes is everyone winds up needing to go to Chile for something. Like, Engin and Pearl realize Serkan went back, and Pearl's like, crap, I promised Eda we need to go there now. But now they have the kid. And so they're like, well, we'll bring Erdem. He can watch the kid. So then that explains why Erdem's going to be there.
Right.
Aidan and Seifi, same thing, because Kemal is like, I'm putting an end to this. I'm talking to Serkan since you clearly won't.
Right.
But, of course, Aidan freaks out, so she tells Seifi they need to go to Chile to find Kemal before he can talk to Serkan, because if he hears it from Kemal, it's going to be worse than hearing it from Aidan.
Yes.
All this stuff. So, you know, it's just all these things that wind up bringing everyone to Chile, which is what plays out in these next few scenes.
Well, and something that was interesting is, I think this is something I hadn't really realized in the past with Aisha's writing, specifically with Erdem. Because I think that Erdem is kind of the character of the Shakespearean jester or the Shakespearean fool, because he often is the one. Well, that's the whole thing of the Shakespearean jester or the fool, is that often they're not actually a fool, and they're the ones actually speaking truth in the storyline that the other characters can't seem to see. So, like, something that he something, because he'll come up with these things and he'll say these things like, he's like, oh, I would predict that Edda got married and had a baby. And then later on he says, oh, is this season 2 of Edda and Serkan's love? He's the one that's kind of shouting these things that we as the audience are like, well, yes, of course that's happening. And the other people who are involved in the scene, in the play, are like, clueless to.
No. Well, and if you think about it, he's the one who made sure everyone made it to the cafe at the end of the episode.
He is.
So, like, and
he kind of orchestrated it in
So do you think Serkan wrote that note, or do you think Erdem did that? Because why would he leave a note with... He doesn't trust Erdem.
That's true.
Why would he leave a note with Erdem to give to Ingen? Why wouldn't he just text Ingen and be like, yeah, I'm going after Edda? Like,
that's a good point.
And, you know, Erdem, now you bring that up, Erdem has also been the one that's like, and this would be credited to... Is it Erdem who says this? Now I'm questioning. But basically when they talk about like it's...
Well, this isn't the first time he does stuff like
No, it's not. But this is even in an episode. It's not even one that Aisha wrote. But if I'm remembering this correctly, it tracks because he's like, this is 2020. Women can propose to men too. And that's when Edda proposes to Serkan on the plane at the end of 26. And it is Erdem who says that, right? Okay.
It is.
So bravo to Fikret and Karim for keeping that going. But yeah, like There's been a few times where it's like, yeah, is he kind of the evil genius behind all of this?
Right.
Portraying that he's a complete moron, which, oh, never mind. I was just going to bring up another DZ example, but it would have been a spoiler for you. So anyways.
Oh, I think I know who you're talking about because from the start, he's supposedly just an idiot drunk, but obviously there's more to his character than that. So I know who you're talking about, even if I haven't seen the full extent of it being played out.
Yes. So that's really,
Yeah, because so one scholar argues that the clowning in Shakespeare's plays may have been intended as a, quote, emotional vacation from the more serious business of the main action. In other words, comic relief, which Erdem has been from the start.
Yep.
Clowning scenes in Shakespeare's tragedies most appear immediately after a truly horrific scene.
Oh my
gosh. Others argue that Shakespeare's clowning goes beyond just comic relief, instead making the horrific or deeply complex scenes more understandable and true to the realities of living then and now. Shifting the focus from the fictional world to the audience's reality helps convey more effectively the theme of the dramas. As Shakespeare's fools speak truth to other characters, they also speak truth to the audience. For example, in The Twelfth Night, first introduces a central theme. Sorry, this is something that is a little different. That's like specific to that one. But yeah, basically there's a quote from a book called Guide to Shakespeare that he says, that of course is the great secret of the successful fool, that he is no fool at all.
Okay. Chills on my arm. Okay. Aisha. Okay.
I can't believe it took me that long to figure it out either.
I mean, really though, I can't either.
Yeah, because I'm like, what is...
It did not even... I mean, there's been a few times where I'm like, oh, that's funny. Like, I just saw it as like, just in that moment, like, oh, haha, it's their way of telling us something. But I didn't think to look deeper than that, which clearly we should have known better.
It literally just occurred to me. I didn't even have this in my notes.
I like... Love that so much. Okay, Aisha Hanum, if you are listening,
there's no doubt she knew what she was doing.
Oh my! Of course she knew. Yes. Like, but if you're listening,
I know
this is just one of the many reasons we love you so much.
Yeah,
and I can't decide if I like hope she's listening or not.
I know.
I don't know if that will make her scared of us, or if she'll be like, "Wow, these girls really, truly." Like, love me. Anyways, listen, I know this isn't, I know not some people just want, and there's nothing wrong with this, if you just want a simple run-of-the-mill love story.
Sure.
And don't get me wrong, there are some great simple run-of-the-mill love stories.
Absolutely.
But there's just something about things like this, gosh, that it just adds a depth to it, and like, it just tells me how much thought and care is put into a story like this. Oh my gosh. I've just missed it. I've missed this so much.
Yeah.
I really miss this so much. Like, and I I already tweeted about this, but like I purposely split this episode into 2 different nights to watch because I was like, we're back in the realm of, we're back in the realm of we can't just watch an episode and barely write anything down and then talk about it. Like there's so much like, and it took me over 2 hours to watch the first hour. And then it took me almost 3 to finish the last hour and a half last night. Oh my gosh. But I wouldn't trade it for,
I know.
I just love it.
Totally. So anyway, we were talking about why they brought, but Erdem goes with them. They all end up kind of descending upon Chile.
Yes.
Including Aidan and
Seifi.
Kemal and Seifi.
Yes. So then we have this whole entire scene between Serkan and Denise, and just chef's kiss, bravo, because I love that Serkan clearly has no interest or is even remotely like entertained by the fact, because the Serkan of 39 was absolutely using the fact that this actress was into him to like get under Edda's skin in what was, I think, supposed to be cute and funny. So this, I love, clearly shows like, no, he's not only all business, but he's all business because that's what this transaction is between him and this person. She's sitting here like, pinch me, you're here, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, are you listening to what I'm telling you?
Did you hear what I said? We're talking about the project.
And the only thing he gets distracted by is Edda sitting outside that window.
Because Barack comes, brings her coffee.
And she kind of pats his hand because it's on her shoulder because he's checking on her like, are you okay? Like the Edda, you've been kind of sad. And that's when she kind of says, I had to run in with my ex-business partner. That's what this was about. Please don't worry about me.
Right.
But all he sees is he doesn't see the verbal interaction of he just sees the physical interaction. And so it causes some question,
Yes. And Drain the Pool mode is activated because whereas he was just singing Edda's praises for her landscaping.
Like you made the right decision. He is, of course, has to be Serkan Bolat and is like, maybe we will take on the landscaping. So I'll have her do a presentation and then we'll decide, if we're going to work together on this, which he knows is just going to piss her off. But as we all know, he
loves to get under her skin.
He loves to get under her skin.
Yeah. So that whole scene, I loved that he was clueless to her advances and then was like, I'm sorry, what's wrong with you? Are you listening to me?
Because, it just makes it super clear that he only has eyes for Edda. And then, again, God bless our writing team, because later on when he's like, well, I haven't been with anyone in 5 years. Yeah. And I'm like, thank you for clarifying that we don't even have to remotely question if this man was with someone.
Because of course he would.
Because of course Serkan Bolat would never.
So Melo has her first sight of Serkan. Serkan hasn't seen her yet, but she sees him and she's like, oh crap. And then Kiraz comes up into the scene and she's like, oh, double crap.
Yeah, because it's like she has to make this decision. Do I show myself and reveal myself? Because then he's going to know that, I'm here too. And that's going to probably put off more alarm bells that it's not just Edda here on work. And like the fact that that Melo has a connection to this little girl. So she kind of has to stand and just watch it unfold.
Right.
Because what happens is a ball hits the water and knocks it onto Serkan's lap. Yeah. And, and it's funny because green seems to be a thing with Kiraz because it's the green ball. There's the green cup when she's doing the magic. Purple. I know. That's what I wanted.
I was like, why can't her color be purple?
Well, her color color can't be purple because green stands for balance, nature, spring, and rebirth. It's the symbol of prosperity, freshness, and progress, renewal, and even immortality.
Yeah. So I understand why green.
Yes.
But part of me was like, it also would have been symbolic if it was purple.
Yes, there's always been this blue and red thing with Edda and Serkan.
Yes. And the combination of blue and red is purple.
Yes. So I'm with you, but I'm good with green for these reasons.
For sure.
So, he is like, well, guess what? You just got me all wet. And she's like, it's June. Like,
you're not going to freeze.
You're not going to freeze. It's fine.
And then Barack comes and basically backs her up.
Yes. And she calls him Booba, which Edda already explained, it's because of his name. Barack, whatever his last name is like Ba something. So Booba.
She calls him Booba.
But it's close enough to Baba that Serkan makes the assumption this must be his child. So he's like, hey, can you teach your daughter to be polite? And he's like, yeah, but can you also like ease up? She's a kid. Maybe you can give her ball back.
Yeah.
And,
and it's a little bit little watered. It's not a big deal.
Right.
Yeah.
So, he gives the ball back, and I love it because Kiraz is like, I don't like you, Serkan Bolat. And he's like, our feelings are mutual, madam. So
they head over to Melo and explain what happened. Because Melo's like, what did he say to you? What did you guys say to him? What's going on? And
because Brock doesn't know any better. He could just say, oh, my boss business partner, Edda, this is her child.
Exactly. Exactly. So they retell the situation, and then Barack ends up taking Kiraz to go fishing
for the rest of the day.
But something really funny and very Serkan that I thought was hilarious was Melo's like, okay, well, why don't we take your helmet off? You're gonna go fishing. And then Kiraz is like, Melo, there are sharks in the ocean. I'm keeping it on.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Loved that.
You can't be too careful. Like, do you understand there are sharks in the ocean? I'm gonna protect myself.
Yeah, leave my helmet on. So so she does that, and then I also did you know when Serkan under his breath as they're walking away, he's like, some people shouldn't have kids.
Yes.
Oh, just you wait. So Kemal arrives. He's looking for Serkan. Everyone starts to actually arrive in Chile now. Right. So he's going to go wait for him in the garden, sip some coffee. And I do love this at the same time. This is when Kerem's like, the Edda I know is not sad like this.
Yes.
And, because, he's like, they find out, he kind of explains that Serkan's taken over all this stuff. She kind of storms off, like, this is my thing. I'm going to take care of it. A few scenes pass. She comes back to Kerem again, and he offers basically to beat him up.
Yeah.
And I love it because she's like, listen, you don't know how tempting that is. It's very tempting. And maybe one day we'll get to do it together, but that's not right today. Now. I have things to take care of. So I already just adore Kerem. Yeah. Like, I adore him. She then updates Melo. Edda updates Melo more on Serkan's presence. Now she has to give this whole presentation. He's going to regret he's going to regret doing this. All this stuff. Ingper and Erdem arrive. Serkan sees them and he's like, what are you guys all doing here? And she's like, we're taking care of this stuff with you.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I'm here for the presentation. And she's like, what presentation? He's like, well, the landscape architect needs to give a presentation. And she's like, they both go, you mean Edda?
Yeah.
And that's when Edda walks up and she's like, oh, you said my name? Yeah, here I am. You guys arrived just in time. She like lifts Serkan's glasses up and she's like, who the heck are you to tell me? And just all very classic Edda stuff, where she's...
And then, where she's incensed, obviously, that he would even doubt her ability.
Which, hello.
And he's like, Edda, we must be professionals.
Oh, I wanted to slap that smirk off his face so badly. And so she's like, I said, spicy Edda's back because she's like, he's like, you have 5 minutes. She's like, I don't even need that. See you at the presentation.
Yep.
And then, I just love it because Ingen and Pearl are like, oh, brother, okay,
like, okay, idiot.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we'll stay for the presentation since you've decided to be a moron.
And I love it because he's like, why is Erdem here? And he's like, so he can watch John so we can deal with you. And I love it because he's like, John's going to be the one to watch him.
Yeah. And then John says to Erdem, like, oh, I'm sorry, they treat you like a child.
So good. So then Seifi and Aidan arrive. They eventually find Kemal. And can I just say, Seifi's face when he sees that Edda is present.
Yeah.
And he gets so happy.
And Aidan gets chills.
And